Hello and welcome to another edition of OCTax Talk. My name is Carolyn Kavecci. I'm the CEO and President of the Orange County Taxpayers Association, and we're so thrilled to have you with us today. We are going to be talking today with Adam Probolsky, President of Orange County's favorite polling and research firm, Probolsky Research. And I want to get this right. It is a full-service opinion research firm specializing in market research and opinion research on elections and public policy. Thank you so much for being with us today, Adam.
Thank you, Carolyn. Glad to be here.
Yeah. Well, I thought we'd just talk a little bit about polling in general. I kind of look at it as an art and a science, sort of a little bit of both, a combination of the two. You kind of agree with that, or you think it's all science?
I do. We use a little bit of math and a lot of art, so for sure, it's a great way of describing it.
Good. So when you put polls together, I know when I get that phone call at my house and I'm one of the nerds who, when I can recognize it's a poll coming in, I run to the phone to take it. I'm probably one of the few people who does that, actually. Yeah, you're thanking me for that, aren't you? So there's a couple different polls. There's like open-ended questions, and then there are where they say, 1 to 10, 10 being most likely, 1 being less likely, and they go on and on and on with those. What's the difference? Why do you use the different types of questions with polling? What does that give you?
So, first of all, our job is to be accurate, and you'll hear me say that a lot. And so our goal is to understand, depending on the project, to predict an outcome, to understand the baseline of customer service, to identify motivations for people to change their behavior or change their opinions. So we just use the right tool for for that particular job, and sometimes that's a yes or no question. Sometimes it's a rating scale, more likely, less likely, kind of a question, and sometimes it's an open-ended question to kind of dive in a little deeper to understand what is moving people's opinion and why they're formulating those opinions.
Interesting. So for actually framing the questions, is there like an art to that? Do the questions really need to be framed a specific way, not to get a specific answer, but to get, I guess, an accurate answer? Is there an art to that as well?
There is, of course, and we look at questions in different ways. So the antiseptic, the very basic baseline: do you support? Do you oppose? Are you going to vote yes? Or are you going to vote no? Or who you're going to vote for? Or in any of those kind of questions need to be very clean and represent as closely the experience of the person. So if it's a voter and we're talking about an election, we need to replicate their voter experience. So what they're going to see on the ballot, whether they're sitting in their kitchen table or in a voting booth. If it's the question of do you support that new power plant down the road from you, we need to present it in the light of how they would organically see that information. To then move it forward to understand what are we call them features and benefits of the candidate or the project or the organization you're testing, we then tend to ask different kinds of questions about their opinions. And it's not just yes or no or good or bad.
In the past couple elections, especially at the national level, there's been this sort of urban legend that people were lying to pollsters specifically to throw things, or they were embarrassed to give an answer to what they were actually going to do or who they were going to be voting for. Do you think that was an accurate representation of what's been happening at the federal level recently?
Look, I don't doubt that some participants in research are doing any one particular thing. But overall, we have the ability to, one, match the population geographically and demographically, and two, ask questions in so many ways to really understand the true nature of what people think. So I'm really not so worried about someone who wants to stick it to the pollster and say something contrary to what they truly believe. I think but to answer the question on a national level, which we do national research, Look, it's harder to do work on a national level. Most of our work is on a typically state basis or a local jurisdiction. It's much easier, right? On a national level, you've got to balance all these different scenarios, including for election politics. You have to balance the electoral college calculations. So I feel a little bit bad for national election pollsters who spend their time on that. We have it easier because it is not as hard to do a poll in the state of Nevada or the state of Florida. It's harder on a national level.
And I always tell, my friends who may not be that nerdy about politics and public policy as some of us, that when these national polls come out, I always tell them, you really got to be worried about specific state polls, because some of these national elections actually, not only come down to states, they come down to counties and precincts and moving the electoral college. So that's really that is really interesting. I tell my friends the same thing. So numbers. You have to poll a specific amount of people in, depending on what the area is that you want to get the information from. I always see these California polls and I think to myself, wow, they didn't poll very many people. It can't be that accurate. So what do you look for as far as getting enough responses back from people to make it an accurate poll?
Our statewide polls tend to have about 900 respondents, and they are very predictive of outcomes. So we're confident that 900 is a solid number statewide. Sometimes you'll see 1,000 or 1,200 or 1,500 for a typical multi-mode or telephone survey. You oftentimes though see much larger samples for online-only surveys. I think the LA Times is now doing that sort of thing, and USC is now doing that sort of thing. And their challenge is it's harder to match the population resident-wise or voter-wise with just online. Not impossible at all, but they kind of tend to have a little bigger universes. But I mean, on a local basis, right in the county of Orange or in Sacramento or city of San Diego, 400, even as few as 300 is just fine. Statewide, 900, 1,000, you're very predictive of outcomes. We certainly accurately predict outcomes at 900.
Good. So I know you're busy. I see your polling coming out all the time. What are Californians thinking right now? What do you feel that you're finding in your polls that the biggest issue of concern is for Californians?
Homelessness.
Yeah, I was going to guess that.
Yeah, it's not just compassion, although that's a part of it. It's not just anger, although that's a part of it. It's not just the economy and how that impacts people's ability to afford a place to live. It's all of those things together. And I'll tell you, the California public is ready for aggressive action. They want big solutions to homelessness. And if that's throwing billions of dollars at it, they're going to support it. As long as there's a clear solution to the problem, which probably doesn't really entirely exist, but they want aggressive action.
Interesting. But like you said before, it's not, help them or get rid of them. It's just solve the problem completely. Are you seeing it more one way than the other? Are the helping them outweighing the getting rid of them, or are we pretty evenly split here in California?
I think if people are being honest, it's the more getting rid of them concept. But that doesn't mean there isn't compassion behind that. But it's an anger over the fact that they are in every quarter of big cities and in some places in suburban communities, and a desire to just change it. People do not want homelessness in their communities, and they want to rid our communities of homelessness.
And well, that must tie into public safety responses too. There's a big, I don't hear defund the police so much anymore. I think that rhetoric has kind of maybe softened a little bit more to the replace certain types of services with more compassionate services. Are you still seeing in your polling that public safety? No, you shook your head there. Are you still kind of seeing public safety and changing how police is being done in California? Are we still seeing that polling high?
I have never seen defund the police get any traction at all. And I'm talking about some of the most progressive places in California. I've never seen defund the police have traction. There is support for, like you say, alternative services, diversion programs, something other than the aggressive police action that we see on TV in play out, right? Virtually very few people want the bad examples that we see on TV where someone ends up dead. But for the most part, you've got broad support for law enforcement and continuing to make sure we have safe communities.
Well, let's talk recall, because those are some of the pollings that I've been privy to hear some information about. The numbers that are being released now from a number of groups are basically saying it's like could go either way. Are you seeing that when you look at those numbers?
We are certainly seeing the trend toward greater support for recall, greater support for the yes vote. I don't think we're there yet, and there's a pretty short time window here for this campaign to play out. So I think there is definitely hope on the side of the yes recall, yes on the recall side, because they're seeing the trend toward their direction. And I have seen, I don't make commentary on this. We're independent. We don't have a position on the recall. But you did see in the last couple of days kind of this governor unhinged a little bit. So maybe he's a little bit worried about it. But we're not there yet. The next round of research in the next couple of weeks might tell a different story. It's not a statistical dead heat.
Yeah. Would you think that there are certain things that could push it one way or the other? I know some of the polling that I saw had an over polling of Democrats and a lower polling of conservative voters to kind of be a more, they would call it a conservative poll, with the thinking that less Democrats are going to turn out and more Republicans are going to turn out. Is turnout going to be what pulls this one way or the other, do you think?
Obviously, that's a huge determining factor. We are a Democratic state. So if Democrats show up and Democrats are largely supportive of this governor, then they can overpower just about anything. But you also see a big chunk of independent voters, of no party preference voters, who are supporting the recall. So there really needs to be an outsized Democratic turnout in order to keep this governor in office. And presumably that's what they're working towards, right? When Senator Elizabeth Warren is on my TV screen,
yes,
it is not helpful to the cause for me to see that. I'm an independent, but I have kind of a less than favorable impression of Senator Warren. So I think what they're really trying to do, presumably, is turn out their base. Although I don't know if that's really effective. I think they should.
My husband said the exact same thing the other night when the commercial came on. He goes, "This is not helping his cause with a lot of people." No. It will be fascinating to see what the turnout actually is, and I also wonder if the candidates who are then running on the second question are going to drive whether the first question gets answered yes or no. I have family members who aren't particularly fond of this governor, but they're not voting for the recall because they take a look at the candidates. And even though this candidate won't be in office, for a long time before they have to do re-election, they're still not willing to do that. And if I think it's Jenny Ray LaRue pops up on my Instagram account one more time, I don't even know who this candidate is, but I literally are inundated with commercials from her on Instagram and Facebook. It's just constant. So all of these independent candidates, I think, are helping in a way. But are you seeing polling showing one of the candidates on the second question is going way up in the lead, or is it still just this group?
I mean, it looks like the Democrat on the ballot, the one Democrat with some level of prominence, is tops on the ballot. So, and he's a YouTube, I don't know, call him star. Yeah, YouTube popularity.
Oh, good. Just what the state needs, right?
Right. So, I mean, I think it's. Hopefully people are having that thoughtful process of,
Yeah.
hey, maybe I don't like this governor or the current policies, but let's take a look at what the alternative looks like and kind of incorporating those consequences into their decisions. There is nobody who ranks beyond single digits that
Right.
has any public policy, governing experience. Which seems a little bit scary for a state as big as ours, with as many complications as ours. Kevin Falconer and Doug Osee, right, two substantive alternative governor, don't really rank anywhere in the polling that really makes a much of a difference. So I really think we've got a shot at keeping this governor or having some, left ball, out of the blue kind of a candidate become our governor for a short period of time.
Well, we did it before a few years ago, so we'll see. We'll see if it. Well, yeah. We'll see if it happens again. I don't know that Governor Schwarzenegger had that much policy experience either. Businessman,
but he had a real team of people, and he was a serious person when it came to making public policy. I think at the end of the day, he did a fairly good job from where he came from. So I'm not sure that same kind of team would coalesce.
That's good. Well, that's good. That's interesting to know. I haven't landed on any of the candidates. I'm not quite sure that there's anybody in there that I think. And then I think there's the fear too that what will happen to the state in 2022. Then who will we get? So it's going to be interesting times in California over this next year. I'm hearing from a lot of my members and a lot of people in Orange County that transparency in government is becoming a big issue to them personally. Are you seeing that in any of your polling, that transparency in government is rising to any level of concern?
I do. I hesitate just because I don't think we have an electorate who is that interested in truly understanding the details. And I'm hoping over some period of time here that changes. We have an increased trust, a little bit of an increased trust in government and institutions. It hit kind of a low starting about 5 years ago, and it's kind of come up a little bit in the last 6-8 months. But I think the public does cry for transparency, but they're not so eager to truly understand the inner workings of how our governments work.
Yeah.
And they are complicated, and they do important work. And if all there is to see about government is a constant negative pinging of anger, we're going to have some problems because we need government and institutions to do good work. And we don't see that engagement that we really need. Engagement is critical.
So how is the pandemic tying into all of this with focus on government? I have so many friends that, the ones that would call me on the phone to ask who to vote for. We were the phone number of people in the neighborhood and the community were called to say, what do these propositions even mean and who do I vote for? And these seem to be the people who are the most angry at government now because of the pandemic and because of masking and vaccines. Are you seeing any of this start to show up in any of the polling that you've been doing? Any of that anger shifting at all, or?
Yes. I mean, it's not a huge, we're in California, so we have less of that anger and angst over COVID, response to COVID, right? Certainly over economic impacts and where we are today in general. But it's a smaller part of California's electorate than it is in other parts of the country.
Yeah, that does make sense. In California, now that I think about it, you're right. It is a smaller portion. Totally, you see it when you go to the Board of Supervisors meetings here in Orange County, and to an extent some of the council meetings. But that is probably a small pool compared to the entire state of California. So incumbents are faring pretty well then in California, you think? If you were to start polling incumbents in California, you think might be doing pretty well, or is there still an anti-incumbent feel out there?
I think things in general are picking up for government and incumbents, but I think we still have a media environment where anger and opposition to virtually anything institutional is pervasive, right? It's out there, and that's the media that a decent number of people are consuming. So I don't suggest that incumbents are safe and that institutions are going to last forever, right? We have to work at this in order to put in place a system where people are confident in their institutions, confident in government, and believe that their elected leaders are actually doing what they want them to do, doing the right thing.
I think 2022 is going to be an interesting election, I think, across the board, especially here in California. So diversity issues have been a really hot topic lately. Me Too issues, Black Lives Matter. Are you still seeing that high angst when you're polling? Does diversity and equality issues pull high for people in California?
No, they don't poll high, but I think we are in our, as much as we probably feel like, some of us feel like we're in the thick of it, right? And the reality is it's not this overwhelming desire of the public to kind of follow through on a ton of these DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives, but it's there. And so I think the people, companies and institutions, government agencies that are being responsive are either responding to the media hype, or they genuinely have an interest in following through because they have an internal agenda to attract more diverse workforce or to project the image that they are being inclusive. It's not so much driven by the public. It's much more driven by the media. But overall, it's probably in the end a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting that, sometimes I do have to remind myself what I see being stirred up on either the cable shows or on radio. Really, when you talk to people in your community, it isn't even binging on anywhere on their list. They have other concerns. I do hear the homelessness a lot. I hear public safety. I'm hearing more about environmental as well here. California seems to be going into a drought. That's what they keep telling us. So what are you seeing as far as environmental issues? Is the drought rising up? We've got a lot of wildfires going on. Are those anything that are a concern to the average Californian?
For sure. There's also kind of an important way to understand California. We have this divide between coastal California and everyone else. And if you are along the coast, not having to do necessarily with your politics, but if you are along the coast, you have a heightened sense of ocean water quality, you have a heightened sense of water quality in general, of concern over climate change. There's a divide in California that kind of geography tells us, and it's not like the first 100 miles and then everyone else. It's the first mile or 2 or 5 along the coast and then everyone else. The difference, if you give the Orange County example, the difference between Yorba Linda and Newport Beach is dramatic when it comes to what people care about when it comes to environmental issues. But there are kind of broader issues that people are concerned about, and that those are generally the secret to the research that we've gotten is the prospective future message of for our kids, for our grandkids, something for our future is really powerful. And so you're going to see a lot of that from public agencies, institutions talking about, and this is something that we've seen as a trend for the last 2, 3, 4 years, that we need to do something today for our future selves and our next generations.
So the wildfires seem to be it's very cyclic, and when it's wildfire season, California kind of deals with this. In Orange County, every once in a while we get the wildfires. But is that the same type as polling would be where you are geography-wise versus whether it's a concern for you?
Sure. I often tell people when I have a call with someone who's out of state. We have clients all over the country, and they'll be asking, "Oh, are you safe from the wildfire?" And I'm like, I have no idea if the closest one is 200 miles away or 1,000
Yeah.
miles away.
Yeah.
We just don't see it here today. Obviously, we were feeling it,
Right.
a year ago. It was right in our backyard. So I think by that same kind of going by that same guide, if there's a wildfire happening today, or you live in an environment where there's a constant threat, right? You live in Anaheim Hills, then yes, this is a part of your daily experience,
Yeah.
and you're constantly concerned about it. But for those of us who live in the cheap seats in the flatlands of Irvine, we're not really thinking about it on a regular basis. And so I think it's really about your personal experience and the threat to you on a regular basis.
Have I missed any big issues going on with Californians here as we kind of come to an end here? Do you think have I missed any issues of concern for Californians that we probably should keep our eye on?
I think we hit on the big
Good.
ones. I think housing is one that's warranted.
And that is a good one. So let's talk about that really quickly before we close. I, as a council member, when I was on the council, we got a lot of, I have mine. I don't want any more people living here. There's too much traffic. Are you seeing that in your polling as well? That the stop housing is becoming a bigger issue than build more housing, or is that too easy of a break for that even?
I think that it's super complicated, right? So we certainly have the I call it the let them live in Victorville syndrome. The idea that look, if you can't afford to live in Orange Park Acres, well then go wherever you can, and if that's Corona or that Corona gets too expensive, you got to keep going farther out. That's your deal. I think that is a part of the calculation for some people. But the truth is, we are having these Sacramento-based policies come upon us that are dictating greater intensity, greater density in all throughout the state, and the prospect of the growth of ADUs, right? That basically everyone has the ability to put a 600 square foot apartment on their property if you have any space whatsoever in your backyard. I think these things are all going to exacerbate parking issues and angst over loss of single family home environment. So I think that is something that is going to come up in a big way. And you've got the pressure of the regional agencies saying you've got to have greater density. So, and you've got to have more affordable housing. So
the arena numbers,
yeah, we are in the early parts of the housing public policy changes in California, and there's going to be some real big pushback from people, especially those who live in single family neighborhoods and want to preserve what they have.
Yeah, I think it's going to be, I noticed years and years and years ago, I kind of made the prediction that the anti-development had kind of become the new calling card for more conservative voters, and I think we're seeing that more and more. I truly believe we're seeing that more and more, at least in Orange County, that the farther to the left and the farther to the right, sometimes there becomes either an anti-multiple housing or anti-single dwelling, no matter where you go. So they've kind of almost met at the bottom middle for that. I think it's going to be a huge issue going forward for California. It's a battle for sure. I'm glad you brought that up. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Adam. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. Again, Adam Probolsky is the president of Probolsky Research, and again, one of of the most sought after research and polling firms in Orange County. So if you are looking to do any polling, whether it's political or for your business or nonprofits, I really just recommend that you give Adam a call at Probolsky Research. And if you'd like more information on the Orange County Taxpayers Association, about membership, about our education issues, about historic Prop 13, you can visit our website at OCTax.org. And please follow us on our social media accounts, both Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, at OC Taxpayers. And with that, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time on OC Tax Talk.